The city as palimpsest. To walk through Paris is to walk through time. It is an act of ambulatory archaeology, where every footstep lands upon layers of history, some visible, some buried, but all palpable. The city is a living palimpsest, a manuscript scraped clean and rewritten over 2 millennia, yet one where the faint, ghostly script of previous ages still bleeds through the modern text. This is the sleeping history of Paris. It is not found in the grand narratives of textbooks or the curated exhibits of museums alone, but is embedded in the very fabric of the city, in the curve of a forgotten street that follows the path of a medieval wall, in the worn stone of a doorstep that has welcomed generations, in the name of a square that commemorates a revolution, and in the sudden, breathtaking view of a Gothic spire from a bustling contemporary boulevard. Our journey is not one of mere sightseeing. It is an attempt to awaken these dormant stories, to listen to the whispers of the past that echo in the narrow lanes of the Ile de la Cité, the scholarly courtyards of the Latin Quarter, the opulent mansions of the Marais, and the wind-swept, artistic heights of Montmartre. We will be urban explorers, not tourists, seeking to understand how this magnificent, complex, and often contradictory city came to be. We will trace the phantom outline of Roman Utopia beneath the shadow of Notre Dame, feel the intellectual fervour of Abelard and the existential angst of Sartre in the cafes of Saint-Germain, witness the gilded cage of aristocracy crumble before the fury of the sans-culottes at the Bastille, and marvel at the audacious vision of Baron Haussmann, who tore down the old to create the new, forever shaping the Paris of our imagination. Our journey is not one of mere sightseeing. It is an attempt to awaken these dormant stories, to listen to the whispers of the past that echo in the narrow lanes of the Ile de la Cité, the scholarly courtyards of the Latin Quarter, the opulent mansions of the Marais, and the wind-swept, artistic heights of Montmartre. We will be urban explorers, not tourists, seeking to understand how this magnificent, complex, and often contradictory city came to be. We will trace the phantom outline of Roman Utopia beneath the shadow of Notre Dame, feel the intellectual fervour of Abelard and the existential angst of Sartre in the cafes of Saint-Germain, witness the gilded cage of aristocracy crumble before the fury of the sans-culottes at the Bastille, and marvel at the audacious vision of Baron Haussmann, who tore down the old to create the new, forever shaping the Paris of our imagination. The cradle. Ile de la Cité. Our exploration must begin where Paris itself began, on the Ile de la Cité. This island, a ship of stone moored in the currents of the Seine, is the city's geographic and historic heart. It was here that a small Gallic tribe, the Parisians, first settled, giving the future metropolis its name. It was here that the Romans established their administrative centre for the town of Lutetia Parisiorum. And it was here, for over 1,000 years, that the destiny of France was forged under the watchful eyes of kings and bishops. To walk the Ile de la Cité is to peel back the very first, deepest layers of Parisian history. Our starting point can be nowhere else but the Parvis de Notre Dame, the vast square that serves as the forecourt to the cathedral. For centuries, this space has been the city's central point, from which all distances in France are measured, marked by a small bronze star, Point Zero des Routes de France. But today, the square holds a more poignant significance. In the aftermath of the devastating fire of April 2019, it became a place of collective mourning and resilience. The cathedral, even in its wounded state, its spire absent and its roof a web of scaffolding, remains the soul of the city. Its history is a microcosm of Paris itself. Begun in 1163 under Bishop Maurice de Sully, its construction spanned nearly 2 centuries, a testament to the enduring faith and ambition of the medieval age. Its Gothic architecture, with its soaring vaults and flying buttresses, was a revolution in stone and light, designed to draw the eyes and the spirit heavenward. Notre Dame has witnessed the coronation of kings, the marriage of princes, the trial of Joan of Arc, and the self-crown of an emperor, Napoleon Bonaparte. It has survived the iconoclasm of the French Revolution, when it was rededicated as a temple of reason, and its statues of kings were beheaded, and the neglect of subsequent centuries, which left it so dilapidated that Victor Hugo penned The Hunchback of Notre Dame in 1831, partly as a plea for its restoration. The novel succeeded, sparking a national passion for the monument and leading to the extensive and controversial restoration by Eugène Violaire-Duc in the mid-19th century. It was he who added the famous gargoyles and chimeras, and the iconic spire, the flesh, that was so tragically lost to the flames. The ongoing reconstruction is just the latest chapter in this long, dramatic life, a symbol of Paris's refusal to let its heritage turn to ash. Yet the history on this spot runs even deeper. The very ground beneath our feet on the Parvis holds the city's origins. Descending a flight of stairs near the cathedral's entrance takes you into the crypt archéologique, one of the most remarkable and understated sites in Paris. Here, a modern city vanishes, and you are plunged into its foundations. Preserved in situ are the ghostly remains of the city's past selves. You can trace the outlines of Gallo-Roman Lutetia, the walls of private houses, the pillars of a public hypocaust, an ancient central heating system, and a section of the original quay along the Seine, remnant, built during the reign of the Emperor Augustus. You can see the foundations of the 6th century Merovingian Cathedral of Saint Etienne, which stood on this spot long before Notre Dame was conceived. The crypt is a literal cross-section of time, where medieval cellars are built upon Roman ramparts. It is here that the concept of Paris as a palimpsest becomes tangible reality. The bustling square above, with its tourists and street performers, rests upon 2,000 years of sleeping urban life. From the Parvis we walk west, towards the tip of the island. We cross the Rue de la Cité, a relatively wide thoroughfare that slices the island in two. This is not a medieval lane but an incision made by Baron Haussmann in the 19th century, who demolished a dense warren of ancient streets to create a more efficient, modern axis. The history of demolition is as much a part of the Parisian story as the history of construction. For every monument that stands, 100 lesser buildings and 1,000 forgotten lives were swept away. Our path leads us to a complex of buildings that embodies the other great power of medieval Paris, royal authority. The Palais de la Cité was the residence of French kings from the 10th to the 14th century, long before the Louvre became the royal seat. Today, two magnificent remnants of this palace survive, encased within the larger, more austere complex of the Palais de Justice. The first is Sainte-Chapelle, commissioned by the pious King Louis IX, later Saint Louis, in the 1240s. It is a jewel box of stone and glass, built to house a collection of precious Christian relics, including the crown of thorns. The chapel is the zenith of rayonnant Gothic architecture. The lower chapel is beautiful, but it is the upper chapel that defies belief. Here the stone walls seem to dissolve entirely, replaced by 15 towering stained glass windows that flood the space with an ethereal, colored light. The windows, containing over 1,000 biblical scenes. Adjacent to this testament of faith is a monument to a much darker chapter of history, the conciergerie. This part of the old palace became a prison, and during the French Revolution, it earned the chilling moniker, the antechamber to the guillotine. Between 1793 and 1794, during the Reign of Terror, some 2,700 prisoners were held here before their final journey to the scaffold. Walking through its vaulted medieval halls, the vast Salle des Gendarmes, where the palace staff once dined, and then into the reconstructed cells, is a profoundly unsettling experience. In a small, grim chapel, you can see the cell where Queen Marie Antoinette spent her last 10 weeks. Her pride and dignity in the face of her accusers, as documented in the records of her trial, stand in stark contrast to the brutal reality of her imprisonment. Other famous prisoners included the revolutionary firebrands Danton and Robespierre, who, in a twist of brutal irony, were themselves consumed by the very terror they had unleashed. The Conciergerie is a place of ghosts, a stark reminder of how the pursuit of liberty can descend into tyranny. The juxtaposition of the divine beauty of Sainte-Chapelle and the grim despair of the Conciergerie, standing side by side, captures the profound dualities of Parisian history: faith and terror, creation and destruction, kingly power and revolutionary justice. Continuing to the westernmost tip of the island, we emerge into the charming, sun-dappled Square du Vert Galant. This small park, sitting at the water's level, is named for King Henri IV, the Green Gallant, whose equestrian statue stands proudly at the head of the Pont Neuf above. Henry IV was one of France's most beloved kings, credited with ending the bloody wars of religion and famously declaring that Paris is well worth a mass upon converting to Catholicism to secure the throne. He was a great builder, a pragmatist who cared for the welfare of his people. This tranquil park, a favorite spot for lovers and dreamers, is a fitting tribute. From here, we look up at the bridge he commissioned, the Pont Neuf, or New Bridge. The name is now an antique irony, as it is the oldest standing bridge across the Seine in Paris. When it was completed in the early 17th century, it was a revolution in urban design. Unlike older bridges, which were crowded with houses and shops, the Pont Neuf was open to the air and light. It was the first bridge in Paris to have pavements, protecting pedestrians from the mud and chaos of carriage traffic. It quickly became the city's social hub, a bustling open-air theatre of Parisian life. Merchant, charlatans, tooth-pullers, poets, prostitutes, and aristocrats all mingled on its wide spans, creating a vibrant, chaotic tableau vividly described in countless historical accounts. Looking at it today, it's hard to imagine that level of clamour. But if you look closely at the stone corbels below the cornice, you can see the mascarons, a series of grotesque and comical carved faces, whose silent expressions seem to mock the centuries of human folly that have passed before them. Leaving the island via the Pont Neuf, we have crossed a landscape that was the epicenter of French power for a millennium. The Ile de la Cité is a place of origins, of foundational myths. It is where God, King, and Justice established their domains, creating a trinity of power that would shape the nation. Though the kings and their courts have long since departed for grander palaces, and the city has sprawled far beyond its island cradle, this small piece of land remains the anchor of Paris. Its history is not loud. It sleeps quietly in the Gothic vaults of its chapels, in the damp stones of its revolutionary prison, and deep beneath the feet of the crowds in its archaeological crypt. To have walked its streets is to have read the first essential chapter of the story of Paris. Our journey into this scholarly heart begins at its most famous institution, the Sorbonne. Founded in 1257 by Robert de Sorbonne as a theological college for poor students, it grew to become the nucleus of the University of Paris, one of the first and most influential universities in the medieval world. The original medieval buildings are long gone, replaced in the 17th century by the grand chapel and courtyard, commissioned by Cardinal Richelieu, whose tomb lies within the chapel, and later extensively rebuilt in the late 19th century. Yet, the spirit of inquiry and debate feels embedded in its walls. For centuries, the Sorbonne was the supreme authority on Catholic theology, its doctors passing judgment on heresies and shaping the intellectual landscape of Europe. It was here that scholasticism, the dominant philosophical method of the Middle Ages, which sought to reconcile faith with reason, was honed to its highest form by thinkers like Thomas Aquinas. To wander the streets surrounding the Sorbonne, like the Rue de la Sorbonne or the Rue des Écoles, is to feel the weight of this intellectual lineage. The air itself seems thick with the ghosts of scholars, their heads bowed over manuscripts in dimly lit scriptoriums. This was the world of Peter Abelard in the 12th century, the brilliant and charismatic philosopher whose tragic love affair with his student Heloise became one of the great romances of the Middle Ages. His lectures, delivered in the open air on the Montagne Sainte-Geneviève, drew students from across the continent, establishing the left bank as a center of learning even before the university was formally chartered. One of the oldest arteries of this quarter is the Rue Saint-Jacques. This is no ordinary street. It follows the path of the Cardo Maximus, the main north-south road of Roman Lutetia. For 2,000 years, people have walked this same route. In the Middle Ages, it was the starting point for pilgrims heading south towards Santiago de Compostela in Spain, hence its name. By the 15th century, with the invention of the printing press, Rue Saint-Jacques and its surrounding lanes became the center of the Parisian book trade. Printers, binders, and booksellers set up shop here, their workshops filled with the clatter of presses and the smell of ink and paper. They produced everything from heavy theological tomes for the Sorbonne's doctors to popular pamphlets that could spread new and often subversive ideas like wildfire. The street was a conduit for knowledge, a physical representation of the power of the printed word to shape society. As we move west, we come to the great boulevards that now define the area, Boulevard Saint-Mich and Boulevard Saint-Germain. Like the Rue de la Cité, these are Haussmann's creations from the Second Empire, wide, straight avenues that plowed through the medieval tangle of streets. While their scale is imperial, their soul remains bohemian and intellectual. This intersection, the heart of the modern Latin Quarter, became the epicenter of 20th century Parisian thought. The legendary cafes here were the outdoor offices and debating halls for the era's leading thinkers. At Les Deux Magots and the neighboring Café de Flore on Boulevard Saint-Germain, the existentialist movement was born. Here, Jean-Paul Sartre and Simone de Beauvoir would sit for hours, smoking, drinking, and writing the works that would challenge the world's notions of freedom, responsibility, and existence. They were the intellectual superstars of their day, and these cafes were their stage. To sit at one of these tables today, with a café crème and a book, is to participate in a ritual, to connect with a powerful intellectual and artistic heritage. To find a more ancient, sleeping history, we need only walk a few blocks from the Sorbonne to the Musée de Cluny, officially the National Museum of the Middle Ages. The museum itself is a historical treasure, housed in the magnificent 15th century Hôtel de Cluny, one of the finest surviving examples of medieval civic architecture in Paris. But the site is even more remarkable for what lies within and beneath it. The museum is built directly atop the ruins of the Fermes de Cluny, the colossal Gallo-Roman public baths. The best preserved part, the frigidarium, with its soaring 14-meter-high vaulted ceiling, is integrated into the museum tour. Standing in this space, you are in the heart of Roman Lutetia. You can almost hear the echoes of splashing water and Roman chatter. This direct physical link to the ancient world, nestled in the heart of the medieval quarter, is a powerful symbol of the city's layered identity. The museum's collection is equally breathtaking, most famous for its series of 6 tapestries, The Lady and the Unicorn. Woven around 1500, these enigmatic and beautiful works, with their rich colors and allegorical scenes representing the 5 senses, and a second, à mon seul désir, to my only desire, are the pinnacle of medieval artistry. They offer a glimpse into a world of chivalry, symbolism, and refined sensibility that is a world away from the gritty intellectual debates of the Sorbonne. For a taste of the medieval street life that Haussmann erased elsewhere, we can venture to the southern edge of the quarter, to the Rue Mouffetard. This long, winding street, which follows a gentle slope down the Montagne Sainte-Geneviève, has been a market street for centuries. It is narrow, crowded, and vibrant, lined with greengrocers, cheese shops, butchers, bakeries, and bustling cafes. It likely follows an old Roman road leading south to Italy. Unlike the grand boulevards, this street was deemed too peripheral to be worth Haussmann's attention, and so it survives as a precious relic. It offers a sensory immersion into an older Paris, the smells of roasting chicken and baking bread, the cries of vendors hawking their produce, the sight of locals haggling and gossiping. Ernest Hemingway, who lived nearby in the 1920s, described it in A Movable Feast. Though it is now popular with tourists, it retains a stubborn, authentic character. It reminds us that history is not just about great men and grand ideas, but also about the daily, mundane, and essential business of life, of buying food, of sharing a meal, of community. The Latin Quarter is a testament to the enduring power of ideas. From the theological hair-splitting of medieval scholastics to the revolutionary slogans of 1968, this neighborhood has been Paris's crucible of thought. It is a place where traditions are both fiercely guarded and radically challenged. Its sleeping history lies in the quiet cloisters of its colleges, in the ink-stained ghosts of its printing presses, in the lingering cigarette smoke of its existentialist cafes, and in the defiant cobblestones that remember the barricades. It is the city's conscience, its memory, and its engine of intellectual renewal. Aristocracy and revolution, Le Marais. Leaving the intellectual bustle of the left bank, we cross the Seine once more, heading into a district that tells a story of glamour, decay, and rebirth. Le Marais. The name means the marsh, a reminder of its origins as a swampy, uninhabited area outside the old city walls. Drained and developed by religious orders in the 13th century, it wasn't until the 17th century that Le Marais experienced its golden age. Following King Henri IV's construction of the magnificent Place Royale, now the Place des Vosges, the district became the most fashionable address in Paris. The French aristocracy flocked here, competing to build the most magnificent private mansions, or hôtels particuliers, turning the Marais into a showcase of Renaissance and Baroque splendor. Our exploration of this aristocratic world begins at its heart, the Place des Vosges. Completed in 1612, it is a masterpiece of urban planning and a stark contrast to the tangled medieval streets it replaced. It is a perfect square, lined with 36 houses of identical design, red brick, white stone quains, and steep slate roofs, all built over a continuous ground-floor arcade. It was the city's first planned residential square, designed for elegant living and promenading, not commerce. This was a space for the nobility to see and be seen. Imagine the square in the 17th century. The arcades filled with lords and ladies in silks and velvets. The central garden the site of tournaments and the occasional duel. It was the epicenter of Parisian high society, a stage for the courtly life celebrated in the letters of Madame de Sévigné, who was born here. Number 6 was the home of Victor Hugo for 16 years, where he wrote much of Les Miserables. Today, the arcades are filled with art galleries, antique shops and expensive cafes, and a central garden is a beloved public park. The square's perfect symmetry and tranquil elegance feel like a portal to the Grand Siècle, the Great Century, of French power and prestige under Louis XIII and Louis XIV. From the Place des Vosges, we plunge into the streets that radiate outwards, each one lined with the sleeping giants of that era. The Hôtel Particulier. The Rue des Francs Bourgeois is a veritable museum of 17th century architecture. At the Hôtel Carnavalet, now the Museum of the History of Paris, you can wander through rooms decorated as they would have been in different historical periods, offering an intimate glimpse into the lives of their wealthy inhabitants. Further down the street is the spectacular Hôtel de Soubise, now home to the French National Archives. Its rococo interiors, particularly the princess's oval salon, are breathtakingly ornate, a confection of gold leaf, cherubs, and myrrhs that speaks of a society dedicated to pleasure and refinement. These mansions were not just homes, they were private palaces designed to project power and status. Behind their imposing street-front facades, they opened onto courtyards and vast private gardens. They were self-contained worlds with stables, kitchens, and servants' quarters, housing hundreds of people. But this gilded age was not to last. As the 18th century progressed, the most fashionable aristocrats began to move west to the newly developed Faubourg Saint-Germain. and Faubourg Saint-Honoré. The French Revolution dealt the final blow. Many of the hotels were seized, their owners having fled or been guillotined. Le Marais began a long, slow decline. The grand houses were subdivided into tenements and workshops. The once manicured gardens became slums. For over a century, Le Marais was a poor, overcrowded, and neglected district, its architectural treasures hidden behind layers of grime and poverty. This very neglect, however, was its salvation. While Haussmann was busy bulldozing other historic areas, Le Marais was largely ignored, its labyrinthine street plan and architectural gems left intact. It wasn't until 1964, under the influence of Culture Minister André Malraux, that Le Marais was declared France's first secteur sauvegardé, historic preservation district. A massive, careful restoration project began, stripping away the centuries of decay, cleaning the stone facades, and restoring the mansions to their former glory. This act of preservation awoke Le Marais from its long slumber, transforming it into the vibrant, chic, and historically rich neighborhood it is today. But the history of Le Marais is not solely one of aristocratic splendor. It has also been, for centuries, a place of refuge and community for those on the margins. Tucked into the heart of the district is the Pletzel, the historic Jewish quarter. Jewish people have lived in Paris since the Roman era, their presence marked by periods of tolerance and brutal persecution. From the late 19th century, a wave of Ashkenazi Jews fleeing pogroms in Eastern Europe settled around the Rue de Rosiers, the Billy Rue, Street of the Rose Bushes. They established a thriving, tight-knit community, a Yiddish-speaking shtetl in the middle of Paris. The street was filled with synagogues, delis, bakeries, and small workshops. This vibrant life was shattered by the Holocaust. During the Nazi occupation of Paris and World War II, the French police, collaborating with the Gestapo, carried out mass arrests. In the Val d'Ivor roundup of July 1942, over 13,000 Jews, including more than 4,000 children, were arrested and temporarily interned, before being deported to Auschwitz. Few returned. Plaques on school walls throughout Le Marais list the names of Jewish children who were taken from their classrooms, a heartbreaking and essential memorial. Walking down the Rue des Rosiers today, you see a street in transition. The famous delis selling falafel and pastrami sandwiches still do a brisk trade, but they are now flanked by trendy fashion boutiques. Yet, the memory of the past is fiercely preserved. The yellow-fronted synagogue on Rue Pavée, designed by Art Nouveau master Hector Gomard, still stands. The history here is raw and painful, a testament to both the community's tragic destruction and its remarkable resilience. The revolutionary spirit that doomed the aristocracy is also deeply inscribed in the geography of Le Marais. On its eastern edge lies the Place de la Bastille. Today it is a chaotic traffic circle, dominated by the Colonne de Juillet, a column commemorating the lesser-known revolution of 1830. There is no trace of the infamous fortress prison that once stood here. The Bastille was a potent symbol of royal tyranny and arbitrary justice. Its storming by a Parisian mob on July 14, 1789, was the spark that ignited the French Revolution. The event itself was less a heroic battle than a confused skirmish, but its symbolic power was immense. It represented the people's victory over despotism. The fortress was promptly demolished, its stones sold as souvenirs or used to build the Pont de la Concorde. The phantom of the Bastille, however, haunts this square. Its outline is sometimes marked on the pavement, a ghostly footprint of the Ancien Régime. A short walk away stands the Hôtel de Ville, the City Hall of Paris. This has been the seat of municipal government since 1357. The current flamboyant neo-Renaissance building is a 19th century reconstruction. The original was burned to the ground in 1871 during the final, bloody days of the Paris Commune. The Commune was a radical socialist government that ruled Paris for 2 months following France's defeat in the Franco-Prussian War. It ended in brutal suppression by the French army, with tens of thousands of communards killed in the fighting or executed afterwards. The burning of the Hôtel de Ville, along with other landmarks like the Tuileries Palace, was an act of defiance by the cornered communards. The destruction and rebuilding of its own city hall symbolizes Paris's turbulent history of internal conflict and its capacity for self-creation out of the ashes of self-destruction. Now, Marais, then, is a district of profound contrasts. It is the story of 17th century opulence and 20th century poverty, of aristocratic privilege and revolutionary fury, of artistic creation and tragic persecution. Its preservation has allowed these disparate histories to coexist. A walk through its streets is a journey through the heights of courtly civilization, the depths of intolerance, and the enduring struggle for liberty that has defined Paris for centuries. It is a neighborhood that fell asleep for over 100 years, only to reawaken as one of the city's most compelling and complex quarters. The Imperial City and the Belle Époque, Grand Boulevards and Montmartre. If the Ile de la Cité is the ancient heart of Paris, and Le Marais its aristocratic memory, then the Grand Boulevards and the Hill of Montmartre represent the birth of modern Paris. This is the city of spectacle, commerce, and art that we recognize today, a city forged in the radical urban surgery of the Second Empire and the creative explosion of the Belle Époque. This period, from the mid-19th to the early 20th century, was an era of unprecedented change, where old Paris was violently torn down and a new, audacious metropolis rose in its place. The Haussmannian Revolution and the Grand Boulevards